Well, guys, thank you for joining me, and CJ, thank you for joining me. I'm here with CJ, one of the founders, owners, everything of Power Cheer Toronto.
Yeah, so we original Power Cheer Toronto, now rebranded Power Cheer and Tumble.
Cool. Awesome. What's the difference for a complete layperson? Difference between the cheering and the tumbling side?
So we have kind of two silos in our business. So the cheerleading point is the main focus of our business, and we run about 25 competitive teams, starting from kind of 4 or 5-year-olds all the way up to young adults that are vying for the podium at the World Championships. About 450 families on our cheerleading side. The tumbling side is more class-based. It's more skill-specific. Small groups, similar to what you'd see at a gymnastics facility, or even like a swimming or any other kind of sport where you're trying to develop individual skills.
So you could work on tumbling skills and then integrate them in the context of like a cheerleading.
Absolutely.
Routine?
So a lot of our members will be competitors on teams, and then they'll take the tumbling stuff as like an augment. So they'll have specific skills they need to work on, maybe at their level, or they're looking to advance. And so maybe next year where they can move up to a higher level.
Cool. And that's awesome. And how long have you guys been open for?
This is our 16th season.
Wow.
So we opened in 2004. We had original 4 partners, down to 3. We've been kind of 3 partners since around 2006.
Cool.
And I've been full-time here as my job since 2007. So it's been quite a ride.
That's awesome. And cheerleading, I feel like, has grown a lot recently. At least I've heard about it more recently. And I kind of think of similar to like CrossFit, how like no one knew what it was. Now everyone kind of knows what it was, even if they're misinformed. Is that the same kind of thing with cheerleading? Has it always been huge in areas? Or
I think that's a very accurate description, and I was going to answer with, hey, it's very similar to CrossFit. If you know, you know.
Right.
But over the last few years, there's been enough mainstream exposure. Here in Canada, we had a couple documentaries come out on Netflix. One of them was called Cheer Squad a couple of years ago, and that highlighted a team in Cambridge that has won Worlds a number of times.
Oh, cool.
And that kind of brought cheerleading to a bigger audience. And then just recently, that brand new documentary, Cheer, which follows a college team in the United States, has kind of re-emerged it in front of a different audience again, a much older, more mature audience. And definitely we've seen a ton of growth. Obviously, I've been involved in the cheer industry since 1999. That was right at the very beginning of all-star cheerleading, so the club side. At that time, school was still big, universities were still big, and over the last 19 years, 20 years, we've seen a shift away from schools, unfortunately, and we're trying to grow that back towards the club side. So it's one of those things that people don't realize how big it is until you attend a cheerleading event, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is gigantic.
Yeah, like I've seen some of the videos that you guys post and just like how many people there are. It's like the Hershey, it's not the Hershey Center. What is it now? The Paramount Fine Food Center. Like it's filled with people.
So we in Canada are fortunate, and in Ontario specifically, we do have a pretty thriving all-star market. There'll be events that take place here in Ontario with 350, 400 teams at them.
Wow.
Still small in comparison to the United States. We'll take 2 teams down at the end of February to Dallas, Texas, where there'll be 1,400 teams.
So how many people are on a team?
Average is kind of 16 to 24-ish range. So you're talking about...
That's insane.
Yeah, if you've ever been to Dallas, if you've ever been to the main Dallas Convention Center, the entire convention center, all of it is one cheer event. So it's a huge thing, obviously, in the United States. And here in Canada, we are growing and developing, and we've had great success the last kind of 5-6 years at the international level across the country with teams. So definitely
That's really
growing.
Cool. And what would you attribute a lot of that success to? I feel like it's one of those things that when I look at, again, from my understanding of cheer, a lot of it is like competition based, like you're training to perform and then compete.
Yeah, that's a big misconception, right? A lot of people think cheerleading. They think, on the side, cheering for a football team, on the side, cheering for a basketball team. And there is still that component. At the university level, a number of teams still participate in that. At the school level, there's teams that do that. But there's another side of cheerleading, which is the competitive side. And that's where these are athletes that are participating in a sport with very set rules, very set scoring, and they're trying to improve various skills to be competitive. So it is a standalone sport, and they are not cheering for anyone. They are simply demonstrating their athleticism. The interesting thing that's happened in the last couple of years is kind of a return to a little bit more traditional style cheerleading in an all-star setting. So I say that, what I mean is the cheer component, the actual kind of signs you see and the yelling, the leading of a crowd,
right?
The leading part of cheerleading,
right,
has come back to the sport.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is at the international level. So when we're talking about country versus country, not club versus club,
right,
they have to cheer. So it's part of their requirement. Is it's scored as an equal part of their routine. It is an important part of what they do. So it's kind of starting to make its way down into All-Star to prepare athletes for that international experience.
That's very cool. And then internationally, how high is, I guess, the organization, or are the organizations recognized? Are they trying to vie to be like an Olympic type sport?
So we currently have provisional status by the International Olympic Committee.
Cool.
We have status by the Canadian Olympic Committee, so recognized status. We are working super hard both at the national level and the provincial level here in Ontario and across the country towards recognized status, both by Sport Ontario and then by Sport Canada. We're getting really close at the national level, and kind of once the national domino falls and they get recognition, it'll be easier for some of us in Ontario and other provinces to get our recognition.
Right.
But it is coming. Worldwide, we are recognized as a sport by Sport Accord, which kind of is the governing body of what is a sport and what is not, and
right,
what makes cheerleading different than gymnastics, and what are the rules that you have to operate it in to be a different sport. So we have recognition at that level. There's a world championship that takes place kind of every year down in Orlando, Florida, for nation versus nation, so by international cheerleading.
Right.
We've had some great success down there over the years. So it is, the international scene is growing. I guess the long-term hope would be, of course, like every sport, we got to go to the Olympics to be valid.
Right.
That may be on the horizon, and we're working hard to make that happen here in Canada.
That's very cool. And then in terms of, like, how does someone get started in something like this? Because I remember the first time I came in here to this facility, for those of you guys that don't know, they're just down the street from Element. I was like, wow, it's huge. And I think there's actually people training at that time when I came in. And as I'm watching them, I was like, that's crazy. Just like anything else, though, that you don't just deadlift 500 pounds, you work up to it. So obviously there's like progression. So if someone's new, how do they get like started? Do they have to have some sort of background? Like,
so the game has changed. Like when I got started, so my quick path to cheerleading, I started and had never seen the sport or never seen anyone do anything besides kind of like the cliche movie stuff.
Yeah.
Was at University of Western Ontario, 1999, Frosh Week. I saw the cheerleaders. I had a friend that was on the team. She was like, "This is awesome. You should come check it out." And I was hooked pretty quick. Been kind of an athletic guy my whole life, involved in a number of different sports. And so I walked on late in life, found cheerleading, kind of did that thing. It's changed because of All-Star. We have kids that show up here at 3 and 4 years old and begin classes and begin training. And then, we have athletes in our program right now. This is our 16th season, and we have athletes that have been with us for 16 years. So we've watched them grow from little kids all the way now to adults. And everyone's path is a little bit different. What we're seeing is kind of normal progression for youth sport. They start as they dabble in a number of sports. They settle on cheerleading, make their way through the system. We also attract a lot of ex-gymnasts, ex-dancers, because maybe gym gets too much in terms of volume and hours, too much in terms of the skill requirement.
Right.
But they can come to cheerleading, use the skills they already have. It's a great transfer. So we do see a lot of that, and a lot of times those athletes maybe enter higher up in our level structure right from the beginning. And then dancers, the same thing. They dance all week, every day, and they too much volume. Right. To put it into a fitness perspective. So they come to us where the volume's a little bit lower. They get a team experience instead of an individual experience. And so we do see a lot of that as well. Word of mouth is, of course, the key. Usually a friend brings a friend, especially on the male side. Usually a friend has to bring a friend, because a lot of times guys are like, I'm not going to the cheerleading. I don't want to be a cheerleader. Right. Till they walk in the door and look around and go, well, this is all right. Yeah. And we hook them pretty quick, because you can quickly understand that the sport is super challenging, and very physical. And so for those athletes that like that, this is a great place to hang out.
Yeah, very, very physical. And like, I feel there's such a large teamwork component to it. Everyone has to be on their game the whole time.
Yeah, and we explain to a lot of people that we're a unique team sport in that there's no alternates in general. There's no alternates, there's no subs, there's no bench time, there's no like, oh, I'm tired, I'm coming out of the game for a bit. Everyone has to be present. So on a team of 24 people, if one person's missing, that usually means that something can't happen that day.
Right.
So unlike other sports where, hey, I can't be there today, no problem. Like we'll just have someone from the third line play on the first line today. No big deal. That can't happen in our sport. So if we're missing someone, then there is an impact to the other 23 people on that floor immediately. So that's a challenge. It's hard because, as you know, in all sports, injuries occur, fatigue occurs. You know, we're dealing with teenagers often and young adults. They have things in their life. They have exams, and you know, a lot of times they have things their families have done or kind of put on them that they can't control. So that's tricky. It's tricky for us to kind of manage all that, but it is a true team sport, meaning that every single person on the floor is 100% contributing to the product. And if anyone is missing, then you know something can't happen. So.
That's interesting. And I'm sure that has a lot of good like carryover, and I think into like, and just to values. I'm a big believer in the value that sport teaches our youth.
Absolutely.
Dedication, determination, teamwork, making sure, like realizing that other people are relying on you for something.
Yeah, and like it's funny you say that. Sitting on the wall over there, you guys can't see it, but on the other wall there's kind of 4 big letters, and those are our core values: dedication, unity, athleticism, and leadership. We really feel that our mission here is to teach life lessons through sport. And to provide a safe, empowering space where kids can fail. That's something that they don't really get to do in society anymore, is make mistakes, because everything's recorded and put out for their friends to judge. And here, mistakes are part of learning, and we encourage kids to push their limits and fail, so they can understand that there's a new limit that they have to break past. So that's our really kind of our mission here, and especially obviously we're about 90% female, maybe a little bit more. And so we have a lot of influence on young females, and young females today need a place to feel empowered to be who they are and kind of push their limits without judgment. So that's really, really important for us.
I think that's really cool to have a safe place where people are taught and encouraged to push their limits and see what they're actually capable of. And, failure is essentially, it's like, I feel like it's going to be celebrated because like, okay, we figured out what we need to work on to improve the next time. It's not you messed up, it's over.
Totally. And the other thing too, and this is a good tie-in with the CrossFit world too, is everyone always says like, oh, CrossFit never gets easy. You just get faster.
Right.
Like, it never gets easy. And the same thing is with our sport. It never gets easy. You just get better and the skills get harder.
Right.
And so when you conquer one hill, there's always another hill. And that's something that is, I think, transferable into their lives, is when you got it all figured out, like, open your eyes, because now you have a whole new thing to figure out. It's never like, oh, I got it made, I've got everything figured out. That's not life. That's not how things are presented to us as individuals. So we teach that you can master today, be the best version of yourself today, just be a little bit better tomorrow.
Right.
And whatever that means for that day is great, because the next day you're going to have new challenges. So I think that's something that a lot of kids, don't necessarily think about when they come here, that it's never going to be easy.
Right.
They look at the advanced teams in our program that are, been to worlds, been on the podium at worlds, and athletes that have mastered skills, and they're like, oh, they're so good, must be so easy. They're the same kids at the end of their full outs that are, on the floor, gassed, exhausted, like, I can't go again, because it doesn't get easy.
Right.
It might get less complex for them or less taxing, but it's never easy.
They're just going to find a different way to essentially step it up.
Absolutely.
When this one thing becomes easy, this next thing is the difficult thing to work on.
Yeah, there's no, like, mastery in our sport is kind of like, hey, you're able to do the skill in any circumstance at any time, but that doesn't make it easy. It just means that you now can do it really well.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And then, so I met you back in the day. You came by the gym, started doing CrossFit. I see in the back corner, again, you guys can't see, his little squat rack and pull-up bar and that kind of thing. So how do you find, like, fitness for you personally, fitness for people here? We actually have a couple of your members here that also do CrossFit. How do you just find, like, fitness in general being important, complementary to this kind of thing?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we preach here all the time is that, like, just do the work. It's about doing the work, and it's about the athletic side of this sport. We preach, and I preach all the time, that you can come in and practice skills, so you can get really good at skills. But if you don't have the fitness to back it up, then the skill's never going to actually hit when it matters.
Right.
We can be really, really good in isolation, but if you want to be able to perform that skill at a high level all the time, you have to have the fitness to back it up. You know, when I found CrossFit, especially you guys, like I kind of dabbled in it back and forth off the .com at university, like most guys, like, oh, this is kind of interesting. That looks terrible. Let's try that.
Yeah.
And I came to CrossFit kind of at a time where I decided to come back onto the floor and compete for a year. And I needed something that was going to push me to understand what it meant to operate at a high heart rate, operate when I'm fatigued, move weight and a variety of different ways, and never really get stagnant. And that's the thing that I like about CrossFit and still love about CrossFit is that if done properly, it never gets old and never gets easy because it's always different. And, you know, I think that cheerleading is like that. Although we have a set routine, it's never the same. You know, your grip's going to be a little bit different. The person's going to spin a little bit different, you know, so you're always going to have to be adapting to a change in stimulus. And I think that CrossFit and that mentality of kind of variable fitness is super, super important. Like you said, we do have the full setup back there. You know, I've Olympic weight or plates and bars and rings, rope, all of it's back there. And we used to do a lot in here. As I've gotten a little bit older, I do a little bit less, partly because, you know, it's not easy to train alone in a big warehouse.
Yeah.
And my body's telling me, you know, I beat it up pretty good as a young kid. So, but yeah, I think it's super important. I wish that more of my athletes did more, like any coach. Like I wish they were in the gym more. But we preach it all the time that fitness is the base layer that everything is built on.
Yeah, I think, and that's the cool part, I think, is looking at something like this as still an expression of fitness and recognizing the importance of still working fitness in a way that you can apply it here, but you can also apply it elsewhere should you choose to. But it doesn't replace the practice you put in here.
No, 100%.
It augments or it makes it easier. Because I think a lot of people, I'm really big on trying to get people like, yeah, you spend all this time in the gym, like pick up a sport outside of it, just because there's other things that you're learning while working on a routine or working on a move in basketball or snowboarding or something else where you have that fitness, but it's, you know, it doesn't replace the skill acquisition and the movement patterns that you're learning picking up a different sport.
Yeah, like one of my least favorite things, and I try to not have my athletes express this, and even my own children. I have 2 boys, and when I talk to them about their sports, I really always try to use the word training, not practice, because for me, I feel like the word practice versus training have very different feels. And practice for me is like, you know, you're going to come in and you're going to do a skill. You're going to work on a skill. You got a skill. Versus training is like, I'm going to do all the things that support that skill development.
Right.
So when I talk to our kids, it's like, hey, today we're going to, you know, okay, everyone will see you practice. Like I try to be like, hey, today's a training session. We're training for our sport. We're not just practicing our sport. And I think that's semantics perhaps, but I think mentally it feels different. And we really try to impart that if you want to be good, you can't just practice something and get good at a skill. Like you need that baseline fitness. And, you know, it's always a challenge with young people to get them to understand that sweating's okay and a high heart rate's okay, but we're getting there.
It's cool that you say that about the training versus practice, because in the fitness world, it's that training versus working out. And the big thing is like there are times that you just need to go in and work out, but there's other times where you need to train. Yeah. And there's other times where you need to compete.
100%.
And it's important, especially in CrossFit. I think a lot of people get caught up in trying to compete all the time. Like they think every day is a competition, and like, no, not every day is a competition, especially if you're a person who wants to go do CrossFit competitions. Your time in the gym for the 4 months leading up to it is training. There's one competition day. And you lose a little bit of the edge that you would have if you treat every day like competition instead of training, reflecting, how can I improve, you know.
And that like, you know, is mirrored here in our sport. You know, obviously we're running our what we call a full out, which is, hey, we're going to put music on, you're going to run your routine just like it was competition, like it's going to be the exact same. And there are times when those full outs are for a training purpose. You know, hey, we're going to do like 5 full outs today or 3 full outs. I don't really even care what the skills are. It's all about conditioning. It's all about baseline kind of, you know, training. Right. Then there's other times of the year where, hey, we're going to do it once today, but it's going to matter. And we're going to, you know, we're going to put them in a pressure situation, whether that's, hey, we're going to, you know, go live on Instagram, or we're going to film this and put it on YouTube, or whatever it is. But creating that competition environment, pressure environment, I think the biggest difference that I see between a training and a working out, or a training and practicing, is intention. If you're coming to train, that means you have an intention. You've defined, what is my goal today? What do I need to work on? And what am I focused on? Versus I'm coming in to get sweaty, get my heart rate up, and like, that's good. Good job, me. Both those have their place. Me personally, I now work out, I think, more than train, unfortunately. For me, it's just like, hey, I just got to get sweaty and work hard. And if I do that today, it's a win. But for those athletes, like you said, that are competitors, there's very little time during the year where they should just be working out. Everything should be done with intention and purpose.
I think the way you said it, like that intention piece of it is so huge, because there are times that you need to just work out. It might be years, it might be a phase in your life. It could be, you're past the competitive days, but it's understanding at what point you are and treating it appropriately.
Yeah, and that was, as you know and can say, like, I've come and gone from Element at times, and part of the reason why I've gone recently is I can't separate train versus workout in the CrossFit environment.
Right.
So when I get into the gym there, I can't put the brakes on.
Right.
And as a result, as I get a little bit older and have some sports stuff, I end up getting hurt. Not because of the modality, but because of my own inability to, like, just go and work out. Doesn't matter. And that's a challenging thing growing up as a competitive athlete. I know you as well played pretty high level basketball, and that's in you. I'm sure you get a basketball in your hand and start running up and down the court, and all of a sudden you're like,
it takes years. I mean, I when I stopped, I didn't touch a basketball for 2 or 3 years after, because I just couldn't. I couldn't separate it. I was always basically
super hard.
Yeah, and in a specifically, socially in a less competitive basketball environment, now I come off as a dick when I'm really competitive, which isn't a nice feeling, because I like to think I'm not a dick.
You're like, hey, I just want to play, but like,
I just couldn't flick that switch, and it took me a long time. And to be honest, it's almost gone too far the other way, where now I almost like, whatever,
like, too casual. Yeah,
but I can't. That middle ground is so difficult once you've it's ingrained in you to be like competitive.
Yeah, like, I was never a high level CrossFitter. I never considered myself a competitive CrossFitter. I think I did one CrossFit competition because I thought it'd be interesting to see, but it's that internal drive.
Yeah.
Where then I end up leaving upset with myself because of how the workout went, instead of going like, hey, good job. You worked hard today. You got sweaty. Moved some weight.
Yeah.
Way to go, me. So
you think, how many reps did I get? Oh, that person beat me. I should have gone faster. I look back and I made the wrong decision.
I waited too long. I should have done more pull-ups. Why didn't I? All those things.
Yeah.
And that was the challenge with me with CrossFit, was not being able to turn that off.
Right. So you mentioned about you have 3 business partners here. How do you find being an entrepreneur, running your own small business, that kind of thing? There's very few people that I know that have been running a business for as long as you have. I mean, you're 4 years older than Element. And I think in this kind of space, there's a lot of similarities to what we do, differences as well. But like, how do you find it? Do you like it? Is it what you expected? I mean, it's interesting. The reason I ask all this stuff is because it's interesting, because I feel like the last 4 or 5 years, like, being an entrepreneur is sexy.
Of course.
All of a sudden. And like, it used to not be. And now I was like, hey, like, I want to start my own thing. I'm like, I don't know. Like,
do you really?
Yeah.
I think, we're the classic Michael Gerber entree leader, or E-Myth.
Yeah.
That was us. Good at a thing. Therefore, we should run a business of the thing. So when we opened, it was a side project. It was a small business. We're like, hey, we can open and have this small thing. No big deal. My one partner, who's about 10 years older than I am, she has like a big ad exec job. Like, she was traveling all the time. My other partner he's now a firefighter, but he was kind of in that space. And then the fourth partner at that time was my girlfriend, and now my wife. So all these things aren't right. Like, you have an age disparity. You have 2 people that are dating, starting a business. Like, there's a lot of risk there. But we did it anyway and kind of took all that risk. And over the years, we've kind of transitioned dramatically from, hey, we coach All-Star. Like that's what I said. Hey, what do you do? Oh, I coach cheerleading. Now I don't even say I really coach cheerleading. Like, I run a business. I own a facility and run a business that teaches kids to, life lessons and also cool skills. The challenges, of course, my wife and I are still obviously partners in the business with our third partner. And that means that her and I spend a ton of time together. So our free time is often talking about the business. That's been the hardest thing, honestly, is separating family time from business time. But in terms of the journey, as you know, it could be lonely at times, but as you said, now it's kind of cool to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
And there's way more resources, and it seems like every day an awesome book comes out or like a new podcast or something. But it's been really learning by failure, to be honest. We say this is a safe place to fail for athletes, like I said earlier, but I think if you name the business mistake, like we've made it. And I think any small business that continues to grow and continues to exist for long enough is going to trip on all those things. We've had the rent issues and the lease issues and the cash flow problems and we need this, but we don't have it. We've had staffing problems. We've had, all the things, and that's, a lot of that is because none of us were business people.
Right.
None of us went to business school. None of us studied business. None of us were business owners. My first full-time job ever in my life, besides coaching cheerleading, was running PCT.
Wow.
So that was kind of like my introduction to like what it is to do a business. Yeah. Right. So, we figured it out, and we survived despite ourselves almost, to be honest. The last 5-6 years, different story. First 10 years was just chaos. Now we've got established systems. We have great managers in place. We have good people to support the outside people, accountants and lawyers and those type people. And we're now understand what the business is and where it needs to go. So a lot of our time now is not spent coaching, me personally. It's on the business side. So, the day-to-day running and managing of people and then systems. So it's been a education for sure, and an education by fire.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting you say like those first 10 years. I feel like everyone I've talked to, it's like the first 10 years you're just figuring stuff out, and then it kind of like begins.
And the crazy part is 10 years of small business ownership is still a long time.
Yes.
Like most small businesses are just gone.
Yeah.
And one of my very best friends is like as entrepreneurial of a person as I've ever met. And he's like, guys, like it's celebrate the fact that you've been open as long as you have. Despite all your issues, despite the problems you've had, you're still here. And that speaks volumes to how you run your business. And, I take that as a huge compliment. In our space, like you guys, it's a fickle space because you aren't dealing with a thing. You're not selling a widget. You're not, you're not adapting to what the next cool thing is that you can sell. You are playing with people's disposable income and creating a culture and an environment that they want to be a part of.
Right.
And that takes tons of work. And, it's very hard to keep that going as everything changes. So 16 years ago, the culture that could exist here could no longer exist here.
Right.
Because of changes in just everything, society, what is okay to say and what is okay to coach and how it's okay to act. Those have all changed, and we've had to evolve kind of how our culture exists. And that is the biggest piece. And that's a similarity to CrossFit, and what made CrossFit so awesome, and I think continues to, is that culture piece. And everyone will say, oh, I go there for the workouts, but it's really for the people and the culture around it. So
it's interesting. I feel like people don't, like the thing that brings someone in isn't the thing that keeps them.
Oh,
like they come like, I'm looking to try a new sport, or I think this looks cool, or like everyone comes for a bunch of different reasons. At the end of the day, I think like the culture and the community aspect is definitely like a sticky factor. But I've seen so many CrossFit gyms specifically be like, oh, we have the best community, the best culture, and like, yeah, but people don't come looking for it.
No.
People come looking for other things. But when you have a really good community and culture, all the other things, like you're talking about being a safe space to fail and teaching good values and all that kind of stuff, that all branches off of that, and that's why people stay.
Yeah, and I had this conversation with one of my managers, kind of lead coaches, the other day, and he was talking about, our team culture, and his specific team that he coaches is struggling a little bit. And so he was sitting with his co-coach to come up with some new, rules and things to kind of guide their culture. And I said, you can do that. You can lay culture on top of something, but unless it's organic and unless it actually comes from somewhere, it's never gonna stay.
Right.
And we've seen people in our industry who have come in the last 16 years, and some have done super well. Like they've opened their business, they've created a great niche, created a good culture, awesome gyms. Other gyms have opened that with like, hey, we have all the things, like you said, we have the best this and the best that and the best this, and they don't last because that's, again, like you said, not what keeps people here.
Right. Yeah.
People don't, they care about, the space and it looks great. Once you're here once or twice, it's no longer impressive. It's just a big room with some blue carpet. But it's, again, the people and the coaches and, that environment that keeps them here, despite, sometimes parental objections like, oh, I don't know if she wants to do this anymore, but I just can't keep her out of the gym. That's what I love to hear. Great. Perfect. Bring her in.
It's working. What kind of stuff would you say you've done intentionally, accidentally, in hindsight, that have been beneficial to your culture overall?
I think one of the things that we have done, and it's evolved over the years, is our marketing strategy, and it's not really a strategy, is just being relentless. So essentially just like blah, 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 vomiting content. We did it a lot better, I think, a few years ago. And again, things have changed the way people consume content 2019, 2020 to how they consumed it 2016, 2017. Like that's changed. So some of the stuff we used to do no longer resonates with, especially our kids, younger kids. So we do a lot of that stuff. We try to make this a really fun space. We have stickers on the wall over there that you can kind of peel off if you see someone do something good. Like kids kind of do that. We kind of celebrate excellence on various other walls, and we're continually making this fun. Trying to make it fun while doing hard work. The other thing is we try, and this is kind of like a classic branding trick for any business. I don't even know if it has a term, but we want them to like be dripping in our brand. So we give them opportunity to purchase stuff. We give them stuff when they sign up that has our brand on it. We encourage them to post on their social media using kind of some imagery like, oh, now look, I'm a Cobra. Like we try to make them say it and make them live it so that it becomes an extension of here. And that's something that pretty much every gym does. It's just how well you do it and how well those kids believe it. We still have our issues, obviously, like any place. I'm sure CrossFit's the same, where people kind of lose their love for that brand or that place, and they, I'll go check out somewhere else. That happens here as well. But we try our very best to make sure that everyone feels a part of the culture and that everyone is, kind of looped in at all times.
That's very cool. And like you were mentioning, like, people saying like, I'm a Cobra. Have you had to work hard to get them to say like, I'm a Cobra, not I'm a cheerleader? You get the difference of like your brand versus like just the sport. Because in CrossFit, a lot of owners have a hard time with like, I'm going to Element versus I'm going to CrossFit today.
Sure, right, and that's a challenge. I think the only thing that's occurred in the last little while that we've noticed is the rise of the personal brand, right? So now I'm sure that any business owner, if you're listening to this, you've probably seen it. Building your personal brand is like equally too important as building your business. Or if I'm an athlete, I'm a member of X team, but I have my own personal brand that is like almost more important than this brand. Right. And that's happening here. It's happening in our sport where kids are leveraging social media, Instagram, TikTok, especially, to create their brand. The good thing is most of them have our name in somewhere in their description of where they're from. Right. But that is something that we deal with. We deal with our coaching staff too, where some of them are, hey, they've been around a long time and they are, they're Coach Jim or Coach John or whatever. They're not necessarily PCT Coach John. Right. You know what I mean? So that's been a challenge. But we do find that, once people are here, the majority of them identify themselves as, hey, I'm a PCT cheerleader. I'm not just a cheerleader. And, the competition breeds that, obviously, because when they go to events, they're branded in our stuff and they're representing our program. But there is that buy-in, and we see that especially in some of the big programs here in Canada, where people are like live and die by that's who I am and that's what I want to be and that's all I want to be. So it definitely exists in our sport, but I see the challenge you guys have, and I always find that interesting how gym owners on your space decide to be CrossFit blank or blank CrossFit. Right. And I know we've had that conversation before, but I can see that as a tricky identifier where you're identifying more with the parent brand, not necessarily the provider. Yeah, like it's an interesting thing, mostly out of the replaceability of if it's a parent brand. It's kind of, I use the analogy with a lot of people. I'm a guy who uses analogies for everything. I feel I don't know if it's like a coaching thing or what, but like I feel it's kind of like, to me, CrossFit's a category, even though like I'm an affiliate, I pay to use the name, but you have, it's like an Irish pub. You have a wide range of Irish pubs that are really cheap, $3 beers to really bougie, upscale, fancy, like, full menu, great sit-down place. You have ones that are a little more family-oriented, and I really want, to make sure that people know, like, they're not all the same, just like not all cheerleading clubs are the same. No, absolutely, and I think that kind of nailed it on the head, that the category of what defines what we are, whether that is in the fitness space or in sports space like us, just defines that's kind of what you do. It doesn't define, how you do it. And I think that is the differentiator. And we've been fortunate to be open for as long as we have and seen the industry evolve, and how we do things now have evolved. And we're always evolving and changing those things because of feedback from parents and feedback from athletes and what's happening in the industry. You know, we can't just sit down and say, well, we've been here for 16 years. We'll just do it the way we've always done it.
Right.
You know, we talk about the PCT way. Well, the PCT way is not static. You know, I'm sure the, the Element CrossFit way, you know, you're not going to say, well, we're just going to program like we programmed, you know, in 2010 and nothing's going to change, because that doesn't work, you know. And we're also in a industry, similar industries, where it's a service business, and you're actually trying to provide a service that people want to engage with. And if they're telling you, I don't want to engage with what you're offering me, and you don't evolve, and they leave, you can't really fault them.
Yep.
You know, and I think too often gym owners, and I say that from the cheerleading perspective, but probably to you as well, go, I can't believe they would leave. Well, usually there's a sign. You know, sometimes people leave. Like when I've left you, it wasn't like, hey, you're doing anything wrong. It's like, hey, man, I just need to kind of take time for myself. But oftentimes customers and folks leave because they've told you they don't like what's happening, and you either haven't evolved, or sometimes you're like, that's fine. That's not how we do things. That's not our culture.
Yeah.
So there is a fine line there. But you have to be smart and savvy enough to know what is your brand and what is your culture, and also what needs to evolve based on what people are asking.
I think it's so interesting you mentioned that, because it feels like how you were saying before, like we're not selling a widget. If I was selling a widget and no one's buying the widget, it's very, you know, I can be mad at people for not buying it. Like, this is the best widget ever. Look at all it does. Like, you just don't understand why you need this. But then eventually I feel like it's easier for someone to like come to terms with the fact, like, okay, no one wants this widget. Why? Am I explaining it poorly? Maybe it's not actually useful and people don't actually need it. When it comes to culture, I think people get so almost like married to the idea of, I think my way is the best way, that when people aren't buying it, they're like, what's wrong with you? Like, you don't see how awesome it is. Like, you're the idiot, you know, for lack of a better sense. Like, you're not picking it right. Like, I'm doing it right. As opposed to being like, well, like, no one's sticking around.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I need to change. And because I think the thing is, our customers aren't us.
Correct.
Right. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of like entrepreneurs miss, because they're so isolated. You don't have a team of people to talk to about it. You think like everyone should want what I'm offering because I know it's the best. You know, if I'm here and I think tumbling's more important, so I want to focus 80% of our resources on tumbling, and then you're like, no, that's not what really drives it. Like, it's an important part, but it's not the most important part.
Yeah, like if we looked at it like kind of like a really terrible quick example here, like, you know, like I said, we're predominantly female based in terms of our membership, and typically kind of ages kind of 10, 12 to 18. So if I decided, well, I only am going to play death metal,
right,
and I'm not putting any rhinestones on anything, everything's going to have skulls, and everything's going to be black, and our music's going to be, you know, slow and boring, and you're not going to be able to use social media, and you're not going to be able to do anything, and then I'd get mad that I didn't attract that clientele because, well, that's how I want it.
This is the pure way.
That's not my client.
Yeah.
You know, so for us, it's, you know, we're constantly offering what people want at that age group. And, you know, we obviously define it inside of our cultural boundaries, like what is okay and what is not. But, you know, I 100% agree with you that oftentimes people go, especially in our space, this is the way I do things, take it or leave it. And when people leave it, they go, well, why did they leave it?
But this is better. Like, for you maybe, but it's not what they want.
100%. And I think that's a challenge with any service-based thing, especially, you know, when we're talking about premium pricing.
Right.
You know, we are a premium product, and we know that. Similar to CrossFit tends to be a premium product. It's like the difference between buying an Igloo cooler and a Yeti cooler.
Yeah.
You know, the people that buy the Yeti cooler look at the Igloo cooler people and say, like, well, why wouldn't you buy a Yeti cooler? Well, some people can't afford it. B, you know, they don't understand, but they do the same thing.
Yep.
For the most part, you know, and I tend to be attracted to brands that really celebrate that culture piece. Like, you know, Yeti's a great example. You know, they make like fishing and being outside and camping seem epic and awesome, and like their stuff makes it even better. Look how amazing it is. And so you go buy a $400 cooler, you know, versus, you know, going to Canadian Tire and grabbing the Igloo because it's there and convenient. And those two things are similar to, you know, the gym space and the workout space. You can really commit to an expensive or a kind of an upper end brand if it offers and makes you feel a certain way. And then it's no problem, versus just driving down the street and stopping wherever and be like, oh, it says cheerleading on the wall there, and walking in and there's like, you know, it's not what you thought it was.
I think it's so interesting you bring up Yeti because I don't know if you saw, they did like a tear down where they like cut, like sawzall a Yeti in half and sawzall an Igloo, and they're like, it's the same.
Yep.
And it's like, And this is exactly it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Like, in terms of keeping food cold, yes, it's the same. In terms of all the other stuff that surrounds it, the way you feel, the way it buckles up. Like, you know, I don't have a Yeti cooler, but I have a couple of Yeti mugs, and like just they're over-engineered, they're stronger, the material's a little nicer on the outside. You know, all these things are marginal, but together you feel a certain way when you have the product. Totally. And I think a lot of people don't get that because they look at it like, oh, it does its job. Like, it checks the box, right? It's the Igloo cooler. Oh, it's, you know, one of those styrofoam coolers that are $2. It keeps the stuff cold. Right? As opposed to like, no, what people buy, especially in a service business, is how you do it and how they feel when they come and they leave, and how they feel when they see your brand, when they tell their friends about what they're doing and where they do it.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. It's with service-based businesses, or anytime you are not selling a thing, you're selling an experience, which is what we are doing. You know, you have to be wary of all of the things, the environment, you know. Is it clean? Is it, you know, or is it bright? Is it, you know, well maintained? Is there enough space? Is it, you know, is it welcoming? Is there nice music playing at the beginning? Are the people at the front desk friendly? You know, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many factors that you have to, all of those things add up to a good customer experience. It's not just winning or becoming more fit. You know, that's the end goal. That's the lagging measure of what they're here to do. But it's all the things that lead into that. You know, I think some businesses miss that mark when they just focus on the measure at the end.
Yep. And talking about winning, I was reading some, it's like a longer article about fitness, and how when you mention winning, this guy was basically saying that like sometimes gym owners, and I'm sure it'll translate here as well, will look at a client that hasn't met their fat loss goal or whatever. And like, man, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're messing up. Like, I wish you would just listen to me. And he was basically saying, it's like, listen, like, what you don't get is like, he's already winning. Like, you know, like, or she's already winning.
Yeah.
They just want a place to come to work out. Cause like, maybe they don't want a six pack. Maybe they just want a place to get sweaty and be surrounded by good people. That's what they specifically want.
Absolutely.
Other people want to be really competitive. Other people want to have a six pack, but like, making sure that your service business, again, within the boundaries that you've established, is giving people what they want, even if it's not what you think they want.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. I'm not telling you that you have to eat this way. It's like, no, I'm here to help you, and this is what we do. And if you're getting what you need out of it, this is great. It's a good space for you.
And I think you would agree, kind of at the end of the day, both of us are in industries where we're trying to allow people to be better versions of themselves.
Yes.
And sometimes, like you said, and this was kind of, I think it was in Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yep.
He talked about, you know, the difference between setting a like goal, like I'm going to run a marathon, and a goal of I'm going to become a runner. You know, I'm going to win worlds in cheerleading, or I'm going to become an amazing cheerleader. You know, I'm going to become, you know, I'm going to go to the CrossFit Games, or I'm going to become, you know, more fit. You know, and those two things don't always align. You know, one of them they're the same. You have to run to do a marathon. You have to do whatever. But if you're measuring it by a destination, you are missing out on the journey. And that is the thing that I think we actually do, is create a journey for people to be better versions of themselves. That gets lost sometimes with the winning.
It is about the journey. A book I read basically said if it wasn't about the journey, you would just take a helicopter and get dropped off at the top of Everest, right? Like, you're like, I'm here. I did it.
Look, I'm
there.
at the top of Everest.
Check the box.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's about the whole journey. And the thing is, if you focus on the journey, if you just made it, you know, to base camp or halfway up, you would still be happy because you went on the journey. And I think, and that's the key of a good service business, is you focus on the journey.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And there's so much wrapped up into results, and so much being able to post, hey, I did this, hey, I did that, that gets lost. And I joke often with my kids. My primary team that I coach is kind of 14 to 22, 23. And I like say all the time, guys, like, you know, Miley said it best, like, it's the climb. So it's about every day, one step further up the rope.
So I heard a lot about this Cheer documentary. You mentioned there was two. I just saw it popped up in my Netflix, like, recommended. I think it's just called like just Cheer. And for the last like 3 weeks, I feel like I've been hearing about it like 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah, it blew up.
Yeah, like everywhere. I was on a snowboard trip and people were talking about it there, like guys who are not into cheerleading at all.
Yeah.
Because I could totally see someone like in our space, like, it's interesting. I get it. I could see all your parents of your kids and even your kids watching it, but people that I have no connection to this stuff have been asking me, I guess, because I'm in the fitness space. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Is it a good documentary? Is it bad?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of came onto the scene, and we were all, of course, in the industry excited about it. It's always cool when our sport gets kind of elevated to that stage. It's a good documentary. Like any documentary, it has its story it's trying to tell.
Right.
But it's a decent look into kind of upper end cheerleading, specifically in that case, college. So it's based in Texas in a college called Navarro College. They've been kind of a powerhouse for a number of years. And it follows kind of their journey towards the U.S. College Nationals called NCA in Daytona. And it's a good look into our sport in terms of it is physical. It's a contact sport. At the end of the day, cheerleading is a contact sport. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's a contact sport with no equipment. So we have our injuries, and that's showcased in that documentary, and we also have a variety of personalities that we're trying to deal with on a team because the sport of cheerleading attracts people from all sorts of demographics and all sorts of experiences and all sorts of backgrounds. And as a result, oftentimes we have teams that are not that have not had the same experience and maybe come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and we have to make them work together. And that I think they do a good job of showcasing that there. If you have not watched it, I would recommend it. It's kind of an interesting look into what we do. And it's like any good sports documentary or sports type movie. It's full of all the good things that give you all the feels. So
that's very cool. Have you noticed, like, when something like that comes out, does it change? Do people hear, is there like a good buzz about it? They're like, oh, the thing I do is like,
yeah,
on TV,
of course. I think it blew up to the point where it's on Ellen, I think, this morning.
Oh, wow.
As if we're filming today, I believe it's on the Ellen show this morning, which is pretty cool. We had a loose tie to it in that one of the characters who's kind of not one of the main characters, but one of the kind of the edge characters who is on camera quite a bit and is talked to. He spent a couple of years here cheerleading. So we were part of his journey, which is cool. We have another athlete here who was on Navarro a couple of years ago. So she was there in 2018, kind of 1 year before. So that's kind of neat that, hey, we've had these loose connections. Myself and Nicole, that's my wife, we competed in Daytona at NCA in 2000. She was 2002 to 2003, and I was there 2001, 2002, and 2003. So it's kind of cool to kind of do that. But yeah, of course our parents talk about it. Of course our kids talk about it. The interesting thing is because it follows a university or college program, and it's by the producers of Last Chance U.
Okay.
So the same guys that directed and produced Last Chance U, if you've seen that, kind of the football story, junior colleges, produced this. So it's pretty raw. It's pretty real in that aspect. They don't really pull a lot of punches. It's not quite as abrasive as Last Chance U if you watch some of those, but it is a good look. It's a good look into what we do, and they don't hide a lot. One of the negative feedbacks, I guess, inside of our industry is it kind of highlights injury, but injuries happen. It's a contact sport. We're a competitive sport, and competitive cheerleading at that level is high risk. We're throwing humans in the sky and catching them. We're throwing humans on top of other humans on top of other humans. There's going to be injury, and I think at any sport at any level is going to have those. And when you point a camera at a sport for long enough, you're going to see someone get hurt. It's just the nature of the beast.
I always find it's interesting how we've become so injury averse. And I'm not trying to say this in terms of like injury is a good thing. It's not. But at some point, it's an inevitability that something's going to happen. And I feel like you do your best to train to prevent it, to mitigate whatever, might happen. But it's just so interesting to me how so many people are afraid of injuring one thing and they'll do something else. And because they aren't actually aware of the real risks of it, they are like, oh, well, that's safe. But this thing seems really scary because exactly your point. Like you put a camera at a sport for a long enough time, you highlight all the injuries. Someone could walk away from it being like, wow, like cheerleading's dangerous. But then if you look at injury rates, I bet it's the same as like soccer or something.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about injury rates in cheerleading. A couple things that make our sport unique. It's a year-round activity. So we operate here. Our season goes from June until May.
Wow.
So 12 months a year. That means that there's a much longer season. Most sports don't run for 12 months in terms of what they actually track. You might have supporting things, but like, football runs for its discrete season. You don't have 12-month football.
Right.
So the injury rate is a little skewed because of that. And it's also, the participation is pretty broad. There's a lot of people participating in it. So there's been studies that have come out to say, hey, cheerleading is super high risk and a lot of injuries, but they've been kind of, the other side has debunked it, saying, well, this is the actual stats. Is it high risk? Absolutely. Is there ability to get injured? Absolutely. And we emphasize with our coaches safe, proper progression, and we ensure that we have proper equipment, we have a safe surface to practice on at all times, and we're staying within kind of our bounds. But like anything, and when you're the tip of the spear, which Navarro College is, trying to push the limits of what they need to do, you're risky. It's risky. It just is. And I think we watch the Olympic Games, which are supposed to be the pinnacle of athletic achievement, and people get hurt.
Right.
Does that mean that they weren't prepared? No, because they were at the Olympics.
Correct.
It just means that it's hard. You watch a skier on a downhill race, like they're literally at the edge of control because that's what the sport requires. And does that make it, crazy? To some people, maybe, but not to the downhill skier. And same as cheerleading. I think kids are crazy to allow us to, throw them in the sky and have them spin around and catch them. But I still teach it. I think I would be nervous to do it, but they love it and we teach it properly so that they're able to do it. I'm sure the outside world looks at that and goes, man, these kids are crazy, or they're nuts, but that's what they love and it's sport, There's
always a chance of it. And I think that's the thing. So I just came back from a snowboard trip and I had a pretty serious fall and ended up spraining my ankle, and people seeing me hobbling around the gym are like, man, snowboarding, see, that's why I don't do it. And I was like, no, I'm going to go back. If I can get it healed this year, I'll go back. If not, next year, I'm the injury is not going to prevent me from doing it, because I know that there's a risk of something happening, but there's a risk of something happening when you get in your car and drive down the street. I can't.
There's almost more risk.
Yeah, exactly. I can't let the risk be the thing that lets me, gives me an excuse to just sit on the couch and do nothing. Because I feel like typically the people that I have these conversations with are. It's not like, oh yeah, this is why I don't snowboard or ski. I don't know. I just bought a Peloton instead. It's like, this is why I don't do that stuff because it's crazy. So this is why I just sit around and do nothing.
Yeah.
I'm that's not the purpose of it. But you can get hurt, lower injury, right? But you can get hurt doing that too. And I think at the end of the day, learning how to do things safely, making sure that your staff and everyone around is mitigating those risks and having people understand that, while it's risky, we're going to do it in the safest possible way.
Yeah, and then that's the key point, is that, if you are controlling the controllables and, prepared for the unknown, then that's all you can do. Right. I'm sure, like you said, your snowboarding accident, you didn't set out going oh, I probably shouldn't go down this run because it's, it's way above my level and I don't have the experience. You're probably like, okay, well, here we go. No big deal. And things happen. The unexpected happens. And I think that, like you said, too many people are risk averse, and miss out on all the things that, that could provide. Just because snowboarding seems dangerous, well, then maybe you just don't, do the snowboarding at a higher level. Start at a low level and learn to experience it and learn to love it. The same thing like we talked about earlier about being on that journey. If you think about I could get hurt, you're missing out on the what if you don't.
Right.
And that's something we deal with in this sport quite a bit, is kind of that mental framing of things. Obviously, we're flipping and tumbling and doing all these things, and kids sometimes get, scared, or they call them a mental block, meaning that they're not able to perform a skill because their body and their mind are not letting them. And a lot of that is reframing of, rather than thinking about what could go wrong, think about what will happen when it goes right. And I think too many people look at things from that pessimistic view of you could get hurt. Or you could have an unbelievable day snowboarding in the mountains and come away going, that was a sweet day.
Yeah.
And I'm sure even though you got hurt, you're like, oh, I'm bummed, but hey, the trip was still good.
It was a great trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And exactly that point. I think that's you miss out on a whole bunch of experiences you could have. And, it's about the climb. It's about the journey. It's about experiencing things. And I don't think it's, as long as you're controlling the controllables, I think you almost do yourself a disservice by not trying and learning new things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that was one of the things that drew me early on to a thing like CrossFit. We're kind of circling around here, but was the opportunity to always learn new things. And I think that, and I hope that they continue to keep that alive as part of the foundation of that sport, is that it is about trying new things and the unknown and the unknowable. And that's what makes it exciting, because you have to prepare for something you can't prepare for, and that to me from a sport perspective has always been intriguing, is how do you prepare for the event that you don't even knows coming.
I think that's what got me the most about CrossFit, why I liked it, because I was more of a sport guy always, was the fact that it reminded me more of like a game, whereas like you can practice all these things together, but when it happens, like, you know, I don't know if I have to dribble 3 times and then shoot, or twice. Like, I can do my thing, but one of the times someone might step up and now I have to split second make a different decision. It becomes a different experience.
Yeah.
You're always kind of being proactive and reactive almost in equal parts.
I think that's the drama of that sport. And like, although I don't participate actively at the moment in it, I still consume it. You know, I still watch the sanctionals. I still check out what's going on because it's drama. You're watching that, you know, that cliche, I guess it was maybe Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face. Like, you're watching these athletes, these specimens of athleticism show up and fall apart sometimes on like a simple thing that they just never thought would be there. Yeah. And that to me is unreal. And some of the people that have been at the top of that sport for so long and continue to be, like, I'm from a sport perspective, I'm like, how are you good at everything? Right. That is crazy. And that has ties to our sport because the demands of it are so varied. You know, you can't just be strong. You can't just be flexible. You can't have good endurance. You have to be strong and flexible with good endurance and great power output all at the same time. Right. Which is, again, very difficult.
I think that's why CrossFit's become the sport of fitness, because typically a lot of these things were isolated in silos. Like, you're a weightlifter, okay, you do gymnastics. Like, okay, over here you have good endurance. Okay, over there, like, and now all of a sudden they just like put them together. And it is crazy to see people that are good at everything.
Yeah, and when we now are getting to the point where you have almost world-class standards being met in
Across
all things by the same person. Yeah. Like when you have world-class weightlifting and world-class running endurance and world-class sprinting and like all in the same person. Like that is very compelling to me from like a sport perspective of how they do that, and I'm fascinated on the programming side of how that happens and why that works for certain people. You know, there's no mistake why the champions in that sport have been the champions for so long. Right. You know, and they didn't win the genetic lottery. I guess they did, but
they also put in the work.
Exactly. They've maximized their genetic potential. And it still blows my mind when I see things. I'm like, how did you get stronger and faster and older? Like
it's not supposed to work that way. No. You're defying the laws of, I don't know, TV sports.
Yeah, it's exactly like, you know, it's
supposed to be washed up
or something or hurt or like all of it. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. If people are looking for more information on Power Cheer and Tumble.
Yeah. So we have a website, of course, PCTCheerandTumble.com or PowerCheerTrotter.com. They both exist. We have Instagram at PCTagram, so PCTAGRAM, and on YouTube, PCTCobraTV.
Awesome.
Love to chat if anyone wants to know more about the world of cheerleading.
Cool, and lots of content on there all the time. I see your stuff come out all the time, which is great. I feel like I know what's going on. It's a great putting out content, I think, and I'm trying to get better at it with this kind of stuff as well, but I think it's so key because people will want to, the way people consume content now, people want to see what's happening.
Totally, and people like to see how the sauce is made. Right. You know, they want to experience it, but they also want to know the secrets. You know, gone are the days of like, oh, I'm fooled. Everyone wants to know how Walt Disney makes Walt Disney World.
Yeah, they'll still come, but they're more likely to come and check out Disney World by seeing a little bit of behind the scenes.
Totally.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Not a problem. This is great. Appreciate it.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Cool. Bye, everyone.